gonna introduce you first, and then you can go ahead if you like.
Sure.
So, hello everyone. I'm very happy to introduce 𝐀𝐤 today. 𝐀𝐤 is an assistant professor at the University of Hong Kong, where he directs the Visual AI Lab. He did his PhD at 𝐓𝐢𝐭𝐥𝐞 as well. And we were actually postdocs together at VGG, so it's especially nice for me to introduce him today. After that, he spent some time as visiting faculty researcher at Google Research, and then he was an assistant professor in Bristol, and then he returned to Hong Kong. His current research focuses on spatial intelligence, foundation models, generative AI, and open world learning. He publishes regularly and is an area chair at our major AI conferences. So we are very happy to have you, 𝐀𝐤. Stage is yours.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Fatima, for the very kind introduction. And it's really my pleasure to be here to introduce some of our work around the topic on taming foundation models for spatial intelligence. We start about, by chatting a bit about the foundation models. We have many foundation models nowadays. For example, we have the vision foundation models. For example, Dino, Dino V2, V3, this Dino series. And we also have SAM, segment anything family. So SAM V1, V2, and V3. And all these models, they are very strong. They show very strong capabilities on different aspects, especially for vision tasks. For example, for Dino paper, so they have this emergent property of showing us where the dominant objects are, and this is a very fancy or very important property that we can make use of this property so that we can automatically get the object or some of the things that we care about from the image, so without any supervision. So that's the key, and this allows us to do a lot of things. And then this is the image of the SAM model. This is SAM V1. We can use different prompts, points, box, text, or mask to help us to do the segmentation. And then in SAM V2, they extend the work to also handle video as well. So that's why we have this time arrow here. And recently, they also have the SAM 3D, which allows us to get the 3D shape, rough shape, 3D shape from the images. So that's some example of foundation models in vision side. And we also have some vision language foundation models, for example, CLIP, and later on we have CLIP, CLIP2, so on and so forth. And the key idea is trying to align the text and image. I'm sure some of you are really very familiar with this context, but the key is really we're trying to align the image with the text so that they can stay in the shared embedding, and then we can to have the interaction between these two modalities, and then we can do a lot of powerful things on top of this. And then, after such a training, then we can do, for example, object recognition by simply providing a list of names, and then we can just say, oh, a photo of followed by this object name, and then we can do the recognition in such a so-called zero-shot way. So that's how the vision language models are like. And we also have the BLEEP family. This allows us to have the interleaved input of image, text, and some QA, so we can have the interleaved interaction between the image and text. So we can do many things here as well, and we can also do generation and things like that. So this is about the BLEEP family. So they also have BLEEP V1, V2, and V3 keep getting better and better. And we also have, the generative models. Some, dominant examples include stable diffusion model or stable video diffusion model. So the later one is specifically for video generation. And this is a typical plot for this stable diffusion model. We have some input, and then we have some latent diffusion process to add the noise. And then here we have some condition with no matter which form they are, semantic map, text, or other representations, so on and so forth. And then on top of these conditions, we do the denoising, and then finally we get the denoised signal, which is affected by the condition. So there are the pre-trained stable video diffusion model and the stable video diffusion models. These are, very strong pre-trained models, and we can use them to do many different things, even not if they are not image generation or video generation. And so there are also, many foundation models around large language models and multi-modal language models. So some prime examples include Llama and T5. So they are pure text-based, large language models. And we listed them here because they are open source and we can play a lot around them. And we also have Lava and the 𝐬𝐿 family. So they are the vision language models. So they allow us to process not only text but also images. But they are following the same training paradigm of large language models to do the next token prediction or the other similar techniques. And very recently, so especially starting from year 2024 and also last year 2025, so we also witnessed the emergence of the 3D foundation models, for example, Duster and the VGGT. So for Duster, we can take a pair of images and we can obtain many different output after training the model with a huge amount of data, and later on. VGGT actually optimizes things significantly, so it can accept one-to-many images, an arbitrary number of images as input, and then with the global attention and the frame attention mechanism, eventually, we can get the camera pose, and also with this DPT, we can get the other geometry-related information such as steps map, point map, and the tracks. So it actually significantly simplify things. And today I'm going to cover some of our recent work relevant to these different foundation models and how we're going to make use of such foundation models to help us to do different things, or how we build some foundation models. So we're going to cover vision language alignment. And then we're also going to talk about how can we increase the spatial awareness of multi-modal language models. And later we're going to also talk about our recent work on fit for 3D modeling, how we improve the detail quality of VG type of fit for 3D reconstruction models. And finally, I'm going to talk about some of our work in generative 3D and 4D modeling. So we start from this vision language alignment. This figure again. So here, if we look into this image, we see this image. Actually, of course, the most dominant object is the dog. But aside from the dog, we also have grass and many other details. Even for the dog itself, it contains many, many details. But if we only, use a single word dog to try to align this image, and then, we're not capturing a lot of the great details of the image. So we can't really align them very well in this way, because we lose a lot of information from the image by just using the text dog. So then we also know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And then ideally, what could happen here, or in our mind, a good really a good alignment would be, we have an image and we can convert the image into 1,000 words. And then with this 1,000 word, maybe with a human imagination or with a Oracle image generator, we can generate another image following precisely this image. And then we hope that these two, they will be roughly equivalent. So image and image prime. So this is what we were hoping to achieve. So we have the image, and then we get a caption which is detailed enough to really cover the important detail of the images, and then we can recover the image, that image prime, and then we call this caption the panoptic caption. And then the goal is we want to use this, we want to produce this panoptic caption to bridge between the image and image prime. So this is our goal in this work, which we call panoptic captioning. And in this work, we introduced this new task called panoptic captioning to build the fundamental link between image and the text. And we also establish a new benchmark data set called 𝐓𝐢𝐭𝐥𝐞 benchmark. So 𝐓𝐢 is short for segment anything. So we take their data set from a segment anything and try to develop a data set for this task using that data set, but a subset, not the entire one. And we also propose a new framework for panoptic captioning called 𝐴𝐵. So this work was published in the last year's NeurIPS. So our ultimate goal is really to try to find the minimum text equivalency of images. So because, given image, we can of course describe the image using very long text, but not necessarily very informative for those long text. So we hope that we can have very informative text description so that they can really represent the image. So basically, we want to get the text representation of the image. That's the goal. And in this work, we consider it, the panoptic caption to capture, all entity instances, all the objects within the image, and also their respective locations and attributes. So where they are, and also how they are like, and also the relationships among different objects, and as well as some global image state, for example, the lighting or some other environmental factors. With this, we hope that we can recover or represent the image using the text. So this is a example of the panoptic caption. So for this single image of the dog, so if we describe the image using our panoptic caption, so we have a very long caption just like this. So these square brackets here, they represent the locations, the coordinates of the object, the box. And yeah, so that's how the panoptic caption is like. And we also built this 𝐴𝐵 benchmark. So it consists of 9,000 training samples and also 500 validation images. So we have the generated caption, and we also have so for these auto-generated captions, we use a lot of tools to try to get informative and comprehensive descriptions covering all the aspects we care about. And also we have 130 test images paired with human curated panoptic captions. So we actually use we check all these images, all these captions one by one, and try to correct, refine the captions. So we try our best to ensure that they are really in fact reflecting the actual image, so that we have a reliable test image to compare with. And so this is a statistic about the data set. So last row is the size of the 𝐴𝐈-𝐭𝐥𝐞. So so this is the average number of instances, and also the total categories in the data set. And this is a total number of samples, and also the token number. So then we come to our 𝐵 chain, and we use 𝐵 chain to generate the panoptic caption by 4 stages. So we first capture the class agnostic object locations. We localize all the entities in the image regardless of their categories. We try to get as many as possible, all the boxes, all the objects. And then we use some grounding dino type of model to try to get their box and also their description. And we also try to use more other models to try to get the extra instances that we might have missed here through this stage. And then, for example, here this little thing here, and also then we together with these detected objects and their tags, and also this additionally discovered object, we blend them together, and then we get the final panoptic caption. So here we use some LLM to help us to refine our final output. then, well, so for our training, we use the data set we have trained, then we can train the entire framework. So during training, this is not like end-to-end, but at inference time, we just give an image, and then it can like directly produce as with this panoptic caption. So we don't need to call anything else. Then this is a overview of the results. So we have, so the largest one, so the red circle, is actually represent the outcome of the performance of PanCap along different evaluation metric. For example, the attribute, location, tag, and the relationship, and along these different axes. And also we have the corresponding evaluation on the test set as well. So this is a performance. We can see that our method actually performs better than the other method that can be used to try to produce the very informative captions. We also do some experiment on text to image retrieval. So here are some of the retrieval results using, let's see, the image text vision language models. And here, these are the results. So we convert the image into the text and then try to see, the retrieval result. And we can see, our PanCap chain is actually getting very close to the strongest, image text alignment model retrieval. So, which is very encouraging for us. And then I said at the beginning, we want to get the, image, for image, we want to get the corresponding text description. And then we want to, we want to generate an image following the text so that the image is very much like our input image. So this is how it goes. And here we try to verify this. So this column represents the original input image. And then we convert the image into the captions. And using our panoptic caption, so this is the result we obtained. We can see, I mean, there are still some differences, but they are, quite close already especially compared with the other image. So they are kind of like quite far from the original image, but our results is already quite close.
Can I ask something?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe it's related to what you talk about next, but what I see here is that the object pose and I think camera pose are missing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I see.
So yeah, that's true, because this is the first work we try to address this problem, and we actually make some simplification on this as well. So we have the locations and the object semantic, and also their relationships and things like that. So they are still not detailed or not precise enough to really reflect to precisely 100% precisely capture the original image as well. So this is one reason this current formulation is not ideal. The second reason is we actually use a pre-trained image generator. Is the generation actually, there might be some error in the generation process as well. They might not directly follow the guidance or the text we have provided, although our text now is much more informative than the others already. And here I think we used it's a Pixar Sigma. I think that's the model we used here. And sometimes, because we also encounter a problem that some of the generation models, they cannot take a long text as the input to the generation. So they will actually cut down some of the text, which contains some useful information as well.
But do you think it's as easy as inputting, for example, object pose in addition to object location, or camera pose in addition to, the prompt that you have? Is it that easy? Like, can you just include more information and then...
Yeah, I think so. As long as we have, but our problem is we don't have that information in our input, and we don't have that as part of our captions, so that we don't have this information to input to the generation model. But of course, if we have this additional information, that would be very helpful to get more detailed or image which is closer to the original input.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so feel free to interrupt me anytime if you have any questions. then yeah, let's move on to the next one, spatial awareness of MLLMs. And the background is when we want to, do some spatial reasoning task using multi-modal LLMs, because now these models are so strong, and we just want to, throw anything or throw all the information to them to ask them to give us some answer. And for example, if we give some images of the thing and ask the model to do some spatial related, question answering, describing some objects, or locate where the objects are, for example, find the key or things like that, and to see, so that they need to have certain spatial awareness about the content, about the visual content, then they can complete these tasks. So this is the spatial awareness we care about in this work. And but the problem is, during the pre-training of such multimodal language models, they are not exposed to 3D knowledge. Most of the time they use text, they use images, they might have some videos, but they don't have the 3D data or some 3D information for them to do the learning. So there's a gap here. Then we would like to know, how can we evaluate the MLLM's 3D awareness? So that's the first question we want to answer. And then the second question is, we want to see whether, how the multimodal LLM's 3D awareness will affect the downstream scene understanding task, and also how to enhance their 3D awareness. So this is three questions that we want to answer in this work. So first, because the models, they are not like 3D foundation models, they are multi-modal LLMs, and we only have the visual frames, and then we are trying to figure out a way to really measure their spatial awareness. Then the vehicle we eventually figure out is using the multi-view correspondences, because multi-view correspondences, they are really the fundamental cue for us to do the 3D modeling, especially when we use some geometry related method like retriangulation, boundary adjustment, structural for motion, all these techniques that are backended by the geometry or spatial information. We need to use the correspondence. So correspondence is really a fundamental problem in the vision community itself as well. Then we take the correspondence quality as a vehicle to really help us to probe the awareness of the 3D awareness of the MLLMs. Then we just take the feature maps, and then across different frames, we try to find the correspondences, and then we can measure the correspondences among different frames using the multimodal language models feature. And so that's the key. Then we simply do this by finding the similarity. So in a little neighborhood. Then here are a set of experiments we have done using different data sets. So each little plot represents a data set and one specific task. So the x-axis here represents the quality of the correspondences, and the y-axis represents the performance on the downstream task. For example, for this particular one, so Q4 here means the quality is the correspondence quality is the highest, so lowest to highest. And also here, same for the downstream performance as well, lowest to highest. And then we can clearly observe positive correlation between the correspondence quality and also the downstream task quality. So across all the different data sets, different tasks. So this really tells us a clear trend. Model accuracy improves as the correspondence score increases. So this is important. Then with this observation, it becomes very intuitive for us to improve the 3D awareness of the multi-modal language models. So what we do here is we just because their correspondence is not good enough, then initially we just try to introduce an additional loss function to try to improve their correspondences. So we try to improve the similarities among the points that are representing the same thing, the same point, 3D point in the scene. So this is the number one technique we introduced in this work. And secondly, as said earlier, we also witnessed the development of the 3D foundation models. And for those models, they are naturally trained on real 3D data. And then so they actually, by default, they have the 3D awareness already in their representation. Then we also leverage the 3D foundation models, and we try to distill their features to align with our multi-modal language models representation. And with these two techniques, we can improve the 3D awareness. So we have a additional loss here to train on the to try to improve the correspondences. And then here we send also this image into our 3D foundation models, for example, VGGT, and then get the visual feature, and we try to align the feature between this 3D foundation model and also a MLP projected feature of our MLLMs view. And then so that's all the technique we apply, and then eventually we can improve the 3D awareness of the MLLM. So the last row, 3DRS, is our method. So we can see our method actually improve the performance over all the tasks across all the data sets. And here are the results on VSI bench, and also the other different. We also tried on different MLMs. So Lava next video, and also Lava one vision, and also this 𝐀𝐿2 video. So we tried on these three different multi-modal language models, and they all consistently improved the performance. All right. So and here are some qualitative experiment. We ask question and we provide with some 3D, and then we try to get the answer. So no surprise. So our method actually can get better performance than the baseline model. Baseline model means the model without adding our improvement with the two techniques. So so here they actually a green box overlaid with the red box. So we can't clearly see that, but they are overlapped. So both baseline and our method to get the correct answer. And so also, but here, our answer is this one. The ground truth is this one. Our answer is actually overlaid with the ground truth, but the baseline get the wrong answer. So this is a zero grounding, and same for the other question answering, object captioning, and some other examples.
So can I ask something?
Yes.
So
Sure.
are you also fine-tuning the baseline models on these, or are these the zero-shot performances?
Yeah, so we did fine-tune the model. So we have this is original multi-modal language models, and then we fine-tune it using first the correspondence loss function, and secondly to try to distill the feature embedding using the frozen foundation model.
I'm referring to the baseline scores.
Yeah, that's true. So the baseline is a model. So for example, here this is a baseline and this is our method. So we apply our technique on top of the baseline.
Okay, but the baseline score is just zero-shot results, right? You are not performing some fine-tuning specifically on these data sets.
Yes, that's correct.
So then like there is this question whether you just fine-tune the underlying backbone multimodal LLM, how will it perform on these tasks?
Well, so because we need to find a way to improve the baseline, and then we use this particular way. Of course, we can do certain maybe self-supervised learning type of thing to try to improve as well. That might be helpful as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Then we move to the feasible 3D modeling part. So for 3D reconstruction, we take a set of image, and previously when we use a structure of motion type of technique, for example, a primary example is the CoMap. So this is one example by CoMap. So we can get the sparse reconstruction of the point cloud and using many images. And then the typical paradigm is we get a set of images and we try to get the correspondence. So the correspondence, as we just mentioned, the matching points, and then we do some filtering to remove certain outlier and things like that, and then we do the triangulation and do the bundle adjustment to solve the optimizing problem. So we project with the camera matrix 3D point into 2D, and then we try to minimize the reprojection error. So this is our typical paradigm previously when we use the classic methods. But now when entering this field for techniques, we actually can just send the model with a set of images to the network, and we can get the 3D output in one go without the need of additional optimization. So that's the nice thing about this type of technique. And also we can get relatively denser reconstruction. We can get camera poses, depths, points, and also correspondences. And but we have a couple of observations, because when we look at the geometry, the thing they use here is a depth map. So for example, we have the Duster, Cotter, and VGGT. And for this, if we look at the details and we compare with some monocular depth estimator, for example, depth anything v2 and also Moge, we found that actually the details of these feed-forward 3D models are not as good as those monocular depth estimators. And then so this is then we just want to see whether we can leverage the capabilities of these monocular strong monocular depth estimators to help us improve the details of these feed-forward 3D models. So that's our initial motivation. Then after observing and analyzing all these different models, we found actually there are some key architecture designs in these models. So firstly, we have the encoder, which takes the image as input, and we get the image embedding. And then we also have the decoder. Of course, the different models, they have different design. For example, here at Duster, we have 2 encoders and also 1 decoder. And for Cotter, we might have a different design. But essentially, they all have the encoder and decoder design. And the encoder is responsible to getting the feature from the input image. Decoder is closer to our final task, which is getting the camera pose, getting the geometry, and things like that, more task relevant. And then we were thinking, okay, if we can really try to reduce the amount of parameter we need to tune, and then whether we can fix the decoder, because that's relevant to task, not really the details. And then we only tune the encoder and whether that can work. And of course, because we want to also borrow the capability of monocular depth estimators to help us to improve details. So the initial idea we have is just do the knowledge distillation. We use the depth estimation model to help us to distill the feature and of our feed-forward 3D foundation model like VGT. And also, but unfortunately, we found that actually the performance decreased. The reason is because the monocular depth estimation, they are mostly trained on the monocular radius, and then but for the 3D foundation model, we train them using multi-view images, and so we were kind of like hurting the capability of the 3D foundation models. Then we try to introduce the multi-view data to do the replay, and also the problem still persist. And then we after analyzing sufficiently the feature, and we find actually after distillation, we actually cause certain feature norm drift. Actually, so this is VGT, the original feature map. And then if we use the LoRa only technique, so by the way here we during the distillation we only use attach some LoRa to do the tuning. And even we add the replay, the problem is still there. So this motivate us to think about a solution to really renormalize the feature, so that it's getting closer to the original VGT, and then this can be better processed by the decoder. Then we add this little normalization on top of our LoRa. Then we do exactly the same again. Then we manage to get the very good results. So then we only need to have 10% of a labeled multi-view data, and then for the rest we just use the unlabeled single view images, and then we phrase the almost all the original encoder parameters, decoder parameters. We only attach some LoRa's with our renormalization technique in our encoder. That's all we use, and then we train the model with the DC. So the bottom branch is the monocular depth estimator, the teacher model, and then we managed to get the improvement. So the left-hand side shows as the quantitative result, consistent improvement, and the right-hand side we can see the star. The result with star represent the result of our enhanced model, and we can see actually the details of our method are actually quite improved. For example, comparing this one. So, and also some chair example as well. So for example, here the chairs are more separated as they should be, and similar for this one. So basically we managed to get more details in our depth estimation, and we have also the two-view relative pose estimation results, and also the different view relocalization tasks, and we also get a consistent improvement, and we also have the multi-view point cloud reconstruction results, and also the multi-view pose estimation results. We managed to get the very consistent improvement. Yeah, so that's about this work.
Yeah, Kai, is this a well-known thing, like fixing the scale after LoRa, or were you the first to notice this?
I think we were at least the first to notice this in the for the 3D foundation models, and then we simply apply this technique to renormalize the feature map, and then we can sort of like try to correct the feature norm, and then this is more friendly to the decoder.
I see. And also, like, this design choice to freeze the decoder and focus on the encoder, why not other way around?
Yeah, so here the reason is because we actually experiment this already, but we think about this carefully, and we find that actually the decoder is actually in charge of trying to make the predictions for the camera pose, or the depths, or actually XYZ map and things like that. So there are more kind of like relevant to the final objective, and but the details, we want to get the details, and the details actually is kind of like bounded by our feature. That is we can get those from the input image, and then we actually simply phrase a more task relevant decoder, and then tune the kind of like feature relevant part, or the detail relevant part. And we also have the experiment to validate that as well. So we phrase the encoder, and we only tune the decoder. It won't improve. And also we have tried like different things to validate this observation here as well. And eventually this actually is the simplest one, and also the best performing one.
Okay, interesting. Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you. Right. So then if no other questions, then we move to the next one about more about the generation and editing. So this is our last year SIGGRAPH work. So the task is a 4D generation. I mean, of course, the task is just so for we get the image or text as input, then we want to generate the 4D object, moving one, the moving object. And also we want to do some editing following certain text guidance, for example, the rocket launching, and we hope that we can edit the 4D object so that it will become a status like launching. And similar for this robot volley example, we want it to be on fire, and then we will get this effect. Or if we have some video and we want to get the corresponding 4D, and we can have also some input image and also motion sequence guidance, and we can get the corresponding 4D human. So this is a task. There are some works, actually, some relevant works to try to do the 4D from different perspectives. But for this one, this is about a relevant work about multi-view generation, because later on we actually leverage some of such technique to help us with our 4D generation. And there are some works trying to obtain the 3D or 4D Gaussian by doing some optimization using the diffusion prior. Most of the time the 2D diffusion prior, stable diffusion, or the other alternatives. Or we have certain LGM type of work. They try to mimic the language models, and we try to predict the 3D using in a log lang model fashion. And there are some works directly doing the 3D, for example, 4D, for example, this one, they try to have the, they get a 3D first and then get a deformation field and then gradually get the 4D. So this is such a method. And also this is the LGM 4D version. So they take like a monocular input image and then try to get the Gaussian sequence in different time steps. However, despite those efforts, we still observe, quite some artifacts, and basically people care about two major questions here: temporal consistency and spatial consistency, because they are the key problems when we have some problem with our quality. And eventually, so people care about quality, and then to have better quality, we need to have better temporal consistency and spatial consistency. So this is our objective in this work. We try to improve the spatial consistency and also the temporal consistency. And because we are in a research lab setting, so we don't have like a massive amount of compute and data and things like that. So we start from the pre-trained foundation models. For example, in this work here, we start from a video pre-trained video diffusion model, stable video diffusion, and we take a single input image or a text as input, and then we can get a sequence of frames, so a video basically. And then to get the 4D or 3D, we still need to have multi-view, and then we leverage some technique to get the some additional viewpoints. For example, here we get like another 3 viewpoints, and then we have like 4 sequences now. And then with this, it allows us to predict the Gaussian features for for these different time steps. So then we have this because here is another thing here we did is we try to do some image enhancement, because there are some artifacts in this sequence and also the other viewpoints as well. So we did some image enhancement to enhance the details. But because all this process we mentioned here, image video generation and also multi-view generation, then they have certain artifacts. And here our fitted Gaussian here, of course, they have certain artifacts as well. Then we try to automatically identify those artifacts by simply checking their correspondences, checking their consistency about the feature consistency in the same, for the same spatial point. And then we use this to filter out some regions. And so after filtering out those regions, then we have some masked regions of the object. Then we optimize a video diffusion model to recover those filtered regions, and then we can get a improved sequence of images, a projected image. And then with this we can fit a better sequence of Gaussian. Then we optimize iteratively until we get good results. So that's the pipeline. And then if we want to do some certain editing, then things become pretty straightforward. We can just insert a instruct pixel type of technique here to edit the content following certain text guidance, and then we return this to our optimization loop to fit our Gaussian sequence, and then we iteratively optimize this Gaussian, and eventually we can get edited 4D Gaussian. So this is our results. So image input, and then this is a oops. So this is a 4D generation results. And here are some text to 4D generation results. And editing results, Pikachu in white t-shirt, in black jacket. And robot Wall-E on fire and covered by snow. And video to 4D. So these are the videos, and these are the 4D. Oops. Yeah, so these are the 4Ds. So here are some quantitative results, and here our method consistently achieve better performance than the previous state-of-the-art methods. So last work I would like to mention is about 3D morphing. Do you have any questions for the previous 41? Okay, right. If no more, then we move to this 3D morphing one. So we want to do the morphing. So morphing is it's like changing or deforming the shapes. For example, we want to change the 3D shape gradually from this character called 𝐬𝐭. So that's why we call it 𝐬𝐭. So we change the shape of the character and to a different one smoothly. So we gradually we want to also, for example, here along this trajectory, we control the texture to be more similar to our original character, or we can change the shape of the character gradually, and also the texture gradually as well. So we take an input image as input, and also a target image as our image from this gallery as our target. So we have to a pair of images or a pair of text so as our input, and then we want to get the 3D and also the deformation sequence. So this is the morphing about. And there are some works previously trying to do this task. So for example, some work they have some parametric formulation, or they can do certain simplified shapes, or there are some works that try to do relatively complex optimization, and they have quite slow results. But here the problem for the morphing is existing methods they have limited flexibility. They need to do certain per-scene optimization, and also some other tailored techniques to certain specific type of objects, and the lack of high quality texture 3D morphing. So most of them can handle the pure shape, not like without texture, and there's little control people can do to say I want to maintain a certain portion of the texture, or I want to apply only a certain portion of the target texture. And and also there are another problem is we don't have such paired training data sets from the source to target. And then here comes our technique. So we actually start from a pre-trained flow-based 3D shape generator. Here we use a model called Trellis. So we actually we take their given this input image or target image, we can encode and get their corresponding latent embedding, and then we can sample the point embeddings from the latent space. So the most intuitive way for us to do the deformation is we can simply do the interpolation, for example, linear interpolation or other different interpolation. And here we have a improved method to do the interpolation using the barocentric optimization. So we get this, worse than distant type of estimation, and we get the interpolation, and then with this we can get the interpolated embedding, and then we send these embeddings to the cross-attention module for both geometry and texture, and we send to the decoder to decode to the texture, the 3D morphing result. And now if we want to do certain, control over the texture, so we can select, we can select by a certain threshold how much I want to maintain my original character's texture or things like that, and then we can get the modified embeddings, and then we can control the texture so that we can get texture controlled 3D morphing. So this is the key idea. This entire process we don't have any training, so purely this interpolation stage, and then we can get the texture controlled 3D morphing results. And we have a animation. So because we named the so here are some of the results I have shown at the beginning. We named the method 𝐓𝐢𝐭𝐥𝐞 because 𝐓𝐢𝐭𝐥 is a character in the Journey to the West, classic Chinese literature. So 𝐓𝐢𝐭𝐥 he can actually transform to 72 different forms. So we named the paper actually 𝐓𝐢𝐭𝐥's 70 transformations. And this particular background music is actually the music for the TV series of Journey to the West when I was a kid. So right. So that's it. And then here are a little bit of ablation study about our some of the variants of our interpolation technique, and the final one is ours. And of course, it actually works better than the other variants. And here are some quantitative comparison, and our method achieves the best quantitative results. All right, so just to summarize, we have introduced different works. For VRAM language, we introduced the task of a panoptic captioning. An image is worth 1,000 words, and we seek the minimum text equivalency of an image. And we introduced this new task called panoptic captioning. And then we also introduced a method called a 3DRS to improve the spatial awareness of multi-modal language models. And we leave 3D priors in response to help us to improve the 3D awareness of multi-modal language models. And we also introduced our some feed-forward 3D modeling. And then we introduced our technique to improve the feed-forward 3D modeling details. And we also introduced a method for 4D generation editing, and also the final work about 3D morphing. And there are still many open problems in these different areas I just mentioned. And yeah, for example, scene geometry and physics remains missing, or at least not satisfactory at this moment. And here are a list of the work that I have mentioned today. So most of them are from our last year's NeurIPS, and one of them is from the SIGGRAPH 2025. And yeah, that's all my talk. Thank you, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thanks a lot, Kai, for this great talk, great set of works. There were questions during the talk, but any other remaining? We can also stop recording. This part is more like a discussion, so